en inglés y en español para aquellos que necesiten el servicio de la interpretación al español. Lo pueden hacer haciendo clic en el icono del globo terráqueo que se encuentra en la barra inferior de la pantalla y hacen clic en el idioma español y empezarán a escucharnos a nosotros los intérpretes. Gracias.
Thank you, and thank you for our interpreters for being here with us tonight. I call this meeting to order at 7:03, and I see all board members. All board members are present. Just before we get started, as we're kind of starting here, while what happened yesterday is not directly related to our work, I wanted to just take a moment to remind us of the importance of avoiding anger and division. We all have a sphere of influence in our homes, in our families, where we work, throughout our communities. And I invite each one of us, in whatever that sphere is, large or small, to take a moment and reflect personally kind of on how each of us can avoid anger and division, and how we can work to find unity even with those that we might disagree with. And I just wanted to also share a few words from our State Superintendent of Instruction, Tony Thurmond, after yesterday's events. And this is just a small piece of what he shared. He said, "Today must reinforce our commitment to using the power of education to end hate and bigotry, and to empower communities that have been made vulnerable by systemic inequity." I appreciated his words, and I know it's kind of a crazy, we've had a crazy year for our country, and a crazy way to start off this year, but grateful for our community. All right, we are on to item 2, approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
I move approval of tonight's agenda.
Second.
Public, is there any comments on this item? And not seeing any. Board, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, and with that, the motion passes. We're now on to comments from the board and superintendent. And I realize we're like in a new order now. So Jeff, do you want to go first? And so we'll go Jeff and Isabel, and then it'll be Nancy, Bridget, and myself.
Well, I'm usually the briefest, so that's fine. I just wanted to thank you, Michelle, for making those notes starting off, and just to kind of dovetail to that, I just want to encourage everyone to spend time with their children, to talk to them and just address and help them process some of the things went on. I know my daughter had a lot of questions. We're going through a really stressful and trying time as it is. And then with the events like yesterday, just adds to it. But I think if we're not fearful to talk about it, we try to help translate it and maybe even listen to their perspectives, that helps us develop more clarity and helps us move on.
Thanks, Jeff. Isabel?
Sure. Well, last time was my first and my swearing in day, so I haven't had any chance to talk that much. I say it is very important, the meeting that we have. The email that we got from Mike and also from the staff talking about recommending to the teachers and everybody in the community to be aware of possible trauma for what happened yesterday. And yes, is depending on the kids, some kids will be more affected or more interested in it than others. I was telling today to Michael about that when I was a kid, also already a teenager, I remember in my country or in my country of origin, the war tanks getting into the Congress and breaking in. And a few years later, the coup d'etat that ended up, surprising everybody. Nobody expected that. And Chavez coming in the middle of the night, taking the broadcasting companies, killing everybody in the broadcasting company and saying, now the country is ours. So it is, as a kid, I remember that, after the first time that it was avoided, we had teachers and people in our institution letting us, react and talk and study history, study the procedures and study the Constitution, and learning more about what happened. And that, I think, is important, of course, not depending of if the kids has the anxiety or not. So depends of that. So well, moving forward, so I appreciate that people is aware of trauma and social emotional development in the district and are prepared for that. Talking about everything else and Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody. We had a nice break. During the last time, we didn't talk that much about what we did in December, but there was the EAC conference, the CSBA conference, and I was part of that. I went and I got all the new board member training and the Brown Act workshop trainings, and I've been also reading some of the other, looking at the other online trainings that are still online, and that we can see that one of those, the presentation that our board did about the Juntos program, which was very good and very interesting. Also, we've been Bridget and I, we've been in contact with some members of the community, teachers, parents, and neighbors. Very interesting about how to communicate better all the food resources that are there, and I think those topics will be touched today. There is a lot of anxiety because not everybody knows all the food that is being given by us and the high school unified district. So we're trying to figure out how to make sure that everybody knows about that. And let's see what else. Well, I've been doing activities with the scouts and the troop. We've been having mask, socially distanced hikes during this time, and making sure everybody has outdoors time and trying to be healthy and active, because most people is actually inside their house and cramped inside their house and not very healthy or even emotionally healthy either, not just the body. So and coming back from the break and ready to be part and help. So thank you. That's pretty much it.
Thanks, Isabel. Nancy? You're on mute, Nancy.
Okay, so I actually took a break. I followed best practices, and I didn't do anything school board related, and it was very restorative for me. So this week has been a monumental catch up on many different planes. I participated in the Inclusion Collaborative quarterly meeting today, and they were very interested in learning more about opportunities for feeding in the broader community. And I will be following up with them regarding the map that was correlated, that they could possibly put that on their website as well, because there is uncertainty and wondering about how to meet those basic needs in the community of early care as well. I've been working on delegate assembly activities in the pre-work up for the application. I have also been doing some legislative work as well, building some new relationships with new legislators. And I'm looking forward to the work ahead. I am still finishing and completing the questionnaire that DWK sent out, and I'm mindful that it's due on Saturday. So I'd encourage everybody to continue to pursue and complete that activity. And I'm looking forward to that time when we can get together and learn more about one another and how we want to move forward as a group this year.
Thanks, Nancy. Bridget?
Thanks, Nancy, for that reminder, because I just wrote that at the top of my to-do list again. Yeah, so I was able to take a little break over the break, but I did, like Isabel said, I did spend some time, working on community communication about food availability. And I just want to thank the district for coming up with some meal bundles for the holiday. I know that the second week, from talking to Mike, that the second week, not as many families picked them up, but as the first week, but I know that they made a huge difference from the people who I talked to. And, the food service people have just been working nonstop since March. So I'm asking them to come in over the break and serve some food. I mean, it's really commendable. What I wanted to say though was that I talked to, at the Santa Clara County Office of Education yesterday, I talked to the person who put together that flyer for the county for all the food available countywide. And they're very clear at the county level that the food available for students is for ages 0 to 18 needs to be available anywhere. And she was talking to me and she showed me this presentation that was put together by the city managers in San Jose, the office that deals with, they were talking about rent subsidies, and they're often the people who would qualify for a free and reduced lunch. So anyway, this report that they had, she was explaining to me that they're seeing, especially in the last 3 weeks, a higher need for services, especially food and other things. She said that in this report, which I can share the whole report, but the page that was really interesting was that renters typically make $2,600 a month or earns $2,600 a month, and rent on average is $1,600 or $1,650 in rent. But post-pandemic, since March, renters have only been making less than $1,000, $950 a month. And even though there's what I would like the board to be aware of is this information that they're finding that the renters are not trusting the eviction waivers. And there's so much fear about becoming homeless that people are still finding ways to make their rent. They're putting all of their money into rent. And so any food that the city provides or the school districts provide, it's become their source of food. And so I am just hoping that we can, since we've been back, I've been volunteering in classrooms at CMS and at SMS. And just since we've been back, it's clear that there's families that are stabilized and there's families that are under pressure, and then there's families that are in crisis. And so what I'm hoping, one of the ideas that came up when I was talking to some teachers and community members was the idea of, could the school district partner could the school district find a way to create some sort of a task force around these emergency services that are foundational to the students to be able to study and to be able to learn? It's like, Maslow. And when I talked to the city manager, they said, it's really the city's responsibility to feed people and all those other things. So I'm wondering if as a board, we can find a way to provide direction so that even though the school does a lot, if we can partner and leverage the communications, maybe the city could communicate for us and use those things. Like, how can we do more to get our families access to what's there? In particular, because of that panorama survey question, I know the principals and the social workers and people are following up with those students, the 353rd through 8th graders who said that they did not get enough to eat in the last 3 days on that one survey. But I'm concerned because fast forward, the environment has totally changed, that everything's shut down again. And I'm just very concerned about them. And I think these are the students in our LCAP and in our, they're the most vulnerable, and they're the ones I know that's our focus, but I feel like there's this other layer underneath what we're providing for instruction that it would benefit us to look at, and they trust us and they see us as a provider. So that's my 2 cents. I'm hoping we can move forward on that, and I'll share the slides with you later.
Thanks, Bridget. And to understand, so wanting us to partner with the city to help move the needle more, that's essentially what you're asking, yeah?
Yeah, because we're doing a lot, but I feel like since there's 4 school districts in Sunnyvale, and we're already partnering with the high school district kind of on our own. The high school offers every Wednesday from 11 to 1, the high school offers 7 days of meals. And so we have students in our district who might live right across from Fremont Union High School, and they might not know that there's 7 days of meals unless we help communicate that to them. And we have been, like, recently. That's been really awesome. And same thing for the high school district. They may no longer have children in our school district, but they might live in the area that goes to Fremont High School. And so they might be near a box lunch that they could pick up from us, which we would love to give them, out at Lakewood or Vargas or Ellis or something. And they wouldn't have that communication there. But the city has to, maybe the city could help us, or we could find another way to look at it, because there's other districts around us that are even just within the city of Sunnyvale, and everyone's doing it a little differently. So I'm just hoping that we can really take a hard look at that, since we had so many students say that they were experiencing hunger on that panorama survey. And I'm sure the need has increased since then.
Thank you. So I think the ask is for staff to communicate with the city.
Yes, and other partners.
Yeah, thank you.
So I thought the ask was also to look at what our role is as a board in facilitating that.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So moving on.
Thank you. So I just had excuse me. I also took the break to really take a break and kind of step away from all of my outside responsibilities that are outside of the home. And it was great to just be with my family and just to be mom. I kind of didn't really even get to be mom over summer break like I normally do. So it was great to have that little bit of time. And like Nancy, right, then this week diving back in, not just the school board, but everything, right, kind of stepping back into all that stuff. So yeah, it wasn't nice, and I hope that most people were able to at least take part of that time to practice some of that self-care, right, as we continue on with this rest of the school year, which I'm sure will continue to be challenging in different ways. And then I just wanted to give a quick follow-up. I know I told you beforehand that I was attending Mark Berman's, I can't remember if it's like an education committee. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but I had attended that back in December, and I was able to share our concerns and perspectives. And I also really appreciated that the group he had brought together is really a broad group. He had school board members from all over his district, but then he also had, not everyone can necessarily be there, but this committee that he has includes like superintendent, principal. I think it has a teacher or two. It also has like someone who's in higher ed, someone who's in like the preschool and, you know, first 5 years. So it was really great to see that he had this broad coalition for his education group. So I was appreciative of that. And now time's turned over to you, Dr. Gallagher.
Thank you. I'm going to start off by acknowledging that January is School Board Recognition Month. So we're recognizing school boards across the state, but especially the Sunnyvale School District Board. So the message from CSBA is that CSBA salutes local education agency boards and encourages communities around California to do the same. There are 5,100 California school board trustees, the largest group of elected officials in the state. And their role is to aid in supporting student success by establishing policy priorities and benchmarks. Trustees provide a critical accountability link between schools and the community and offer an accessibility to voters that is unrivaled by other public office holders. So that's the spiel from CSBA about what school board members do generally. And I think we should recognize how very positively engaged our school board has traditionally been and continues to be. And the way, and we're going to talk about this in our board development, how we can continue the culture of civility and all the positive attributes that our particular board has in interacting with each other for the betterment of our students ultimately in our community. So I want to thank the board, and we're trying to think of a few other little things to recognize the role of the board and to recognize School Board Recognition Month. So thank you. Next thing I want to talk about a little bit is just an update on our plans for returning to in-person instruction. As you know, we've said that we want, or we need to have been in the red tier as determined by the state and communicated by the county for 2 weeks before we can return to in-person instruction. So our best laid plans was that would be today, the 7th, and then that would allow us to return for in-person instruction on the 21st. But clearly that hasn't happened, and it doesn't appear that our county will be in the red tier for some time. So what I could tell you, board, that when I met with the principals this week, I said, I recognize that typically when we've moved from one tier to the other, the state and the county have given us several days notice. So we will use those several days notice to let the schools know. And then our clock for 2 weeks will start as soon as we hit the red tier. So in other words, we typically find out like on a Thursday or Friday that we're going to be moving into red on the following Monday or Tuesday. So if that happens on that Monday or Tuesday, whatever day is our first day of red, that's going to start our 2-week clock. And that's when 2 weeks after that, that's when we'll begin our in-person instruction. So I really don't know when that's going to be. Unfortunately, we're in the middle, as we all know, I don't have to elaborate on this. We're in a very difficult time in the pandemic, but hopefully we start turning the corner. Vaccines are starting to go out, and hopefully that's sooner rather than later. The other thing I would say is that over the break, the governor announced some proposals for a plan. And I could say that while his plan is still just a proposal, it has to be approved by the legislature. The plan really supports our plan. So in reading through it, I think it's designed certainly to encourage schools and districts to return to in-person instruction, or to provide that option for families, which is exactly what we're doing. It really dovetails nicely with what our plans are. So we'll have to see what the ultimate approved plan from the governor is. But I think it's going to be very supportive of our efforts moving forward. So our plan is focusing at the beginning on grades K, 1, and 6. And we're going to talk to you, there'll be a presentation in a few minutes about the 6th grade or the middle school return to in-person instruction plan. So that's what they're really focusing on right now, getting all the details together. The sites are scheduling meetings next week with kindergarten, 1st grade, and 6th grade staff. Those teachers who would be potentially changing an assignment, so that we're really geared up and ready for a potential change to in-person instruction. And HR is doing a lot of heavy lifting on that. Our human resources department, in a normal year, and I know this pretty well, is pretty busy. But this year, for example, Mary Beth Allman is doing all the contact tracing. She's our COVID-19 contact with the county. There's just so much to do this year and in the planning, and I really appreciate our HR department, and they're really ready to assist with that transition. So I guess another thing I would say about that is our focus, and maybe we've said this before, is to provide one in-person class at every grade level at every elementary school site. That's really the goal. There may be some sites where there just isn't enough interest to warrant a class at a particular grade level because it's, as you can imagine, it didn't come in, the results didn't come in totally evenly, but the results did come in at that it is about one class per grade level per site. So that's really manageable in terms of what the teachers who are indicating that they're available to work in person and to accommodate students, with a priority, of course, on those who haven't engaged in the virtual school. So that's our update on that. It's unfortunate that we're not starting on the 21st. It does buy us a little bit more time, although we're really want to be ready to go. But I guess the silver lining is that we're going to be more ready when the time comes. And again, starting with K1 and 6th grade. I can give you a couple updates on testing. We're continuing to provide testing for our staff. It looks like the vendor that the county was providing to school districts to help with testing isn't going to work out. So, but our human resources department, Jeremy and Mary Beth, are working with our schools insurance group to find another vendor to be able to help with that. And so we can continue working with El Camino, but in terms of the once a week, we're gearing up to find a way to fill in that gap that we're hoping that the county was going to be able to provide, but that vendor, for whatever reason, isn't working out. And then there have been a lot of questions about vaccines. When are teachers going to get vaccines? Where are school personnel going to get vaccines? And we don't have an update on that yet. My best guess at this point would be that it would be in the month of February. You know, you all know me, I'm very optimistic. I was originally thinking it would be in the month of January, but the way things seem to be rolling out in the county, it looks like it may be closer to February. So that's my update for returning to in-person. And like I said, we're going to get a nice presentation in a few minutes or a little bit about our middle school plans. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mike. All right, we are on to item 4, comments from the Sunnyvale Education Association. If there's an official representative, if you could use the raise hand feature, that would be great. Ali, are you seeing somebody?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. And then item 5 is comments from the California School Employees Association. There's an official representative for that group. If you could please use the raise hand feature. Ali, are you seeing anybody?
Nope,
All right,
not at this time either.
okay, thank you. All right, we are on to item 6, comments from the public. This portion of the agenda provides an opportunity for members of the public to directly address the governing board on any item of interest to the public. However, provisions of the Brown Act preclude any action being taken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. Time limits allocated to public testimony are 3 minutes per person and 20 minutes per topic. Speakers are asked to give their name and affiliation so that an accurate record is reflected in the minutes. And just as a reminder, there will be time for public comment on agendized items later in the meeting. This portion of public comment is for items not on the agenda. So we will, so anyone who would like to speak during this comments from the public section, if you could please use the raise hand feature now. And Ali, I'll turn the time over to you to help us with that. Thank you.
Absolutely. First up, we have DEO, and then Pat Carpio.
Hello, I have kind of two statements to make. The first being that, as we know, that if schools had already opened, they would have been allowed to remain open, and we could have been one of those schools. So I hope we won't lollygag on getting our children back in physical school once we're allowed to. What Dr. Gallagher said certainly was not against my desires, and I guess I'd say was in line with, but let's not lollygag on making this happen. 2, I am utterly confused by Miss Jube's presence here. Perhaps someone can explain her presence. I'm looking on the district website and it says Reed Myers is on the board. But when I look at the minutes, I see that something happened between November 5th and November 18th as far as the makeup of the board, and I can find 0 emails in my inbox explaining this, so perhaps someone could. I'm not saying you're not welcome, Ms. Hughes. I'm just utterly confused by your presence. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll correct the website. Isabel is our new school board member.
Thank you. Yes, that will be updated shortly. Next up is Pat Carpio.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you so much for allowing us to speak. My name is Patricia Carpi Aguilar. I am a teacher at Sunnyvale Middle School, and I think I have to preface my comments by saying that I've been in education for over 3 decades, and this is the first time I am addressing the board at a meeting. So I have some things on my mind, but at first I want to say thank you, because I have noticed how much focus has gone into getting the basic needs of our students met, and I really appreciate that. And as my grandma would be proud to hear me say, thank you is never redundant. So thank you. But now I have a concern that I've been noticing. I teach mostly English learners at Sunnyvale Middle School, and sometimes we had been noticing a lot of disengagement, but we were starting the year trying to figure out what we were doing. They were working with us, our students, parents were working with us, admin, everybody. And when we figured out that we could have supervised learning groups on campus, most of my students qualified. And I noticed a really good improvement. They just started participating more. You could see just the light in their eyes. It was a big deal. And lately, when we come back from the break, it hasn't been like that. I'm sorry to inform, a lot of my students are scared about attending, not only them, but their parents. And one of the things that I have noticed has been a crucial impact on them not being able to attend is the lack of transportation. So they are in supervised learning groups, and they will miss their spot if they miss 2 classes. And so I have actually seen at least 2 of my students miss twice. And just this Wednesday and today, Thursday, it was very difficult for me to see them hunched over under a bunk bed with the wrong lighting, not able to engage, and really a different person. So I was wondering, with this positive light that we see at the end of the tunnel of getting back to in-person instruction, what plans does the district have to allow for the transportation to get these students to the place where they need to be so that they can learn as they were doing at the beginning of the SLGs? And I really appreciate the work that the admin has done to get that going, because I know, having been an administrator myself, it is a lot of work,
30
and we
seconds.
want to honor that work. So if you could just look into how to get students the right transportation to keep them safe and learning, it would be so useful, and it would make such a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then next up is Chandru Bisalbu.
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I am Chandru Vitlabhav. I'm a speech pathologist at Vargas Elementary School. And I also would like to say thank you. I don't believe it is redundant, just like the one of the previous callers. I was on a Zoom call this winter break with some of my teacher friends from out of state. And the stories I'm hearing there are almost apocalyptic. One of my friends in Mansfield, Texas, which is half the size of Sunnyvale, they have a positive case every day. And that is something that, because they have fully in-person learning. Also, one of my friends in South Carolina not only became COVID positive, his school had to shut down because they had not enough healthy staff or even healthy substitutes to maintain an open campus. They also, they admittedly had much more lax regulations than the very stringent ones that were proposed if we were going to open in person. But I think as we're talking about what could have happened regarding returning in-person learning, I think it's very interesting to see what has happened. And I just want to say again, thank you. I think the community, even though we are struggling right now with the really, with some of the extreme challenges with getting students engaged, the main thing is that our students are alive, and we can, as experts in rehabilitation and teaching, we can get students to where they were when it is actually safe to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chandru.
Is that all, Aaliyah?
Everyone who, has spoken once already. If there are any further comments, you can certainly email us at covid19concerns@scSD.org.
Thank you, Aaliyah. All right, we are now on to 7, the presentations. And before we get started, I just want to have us make note, we're getting started a little bit later than we normally do. And then also we have 3 presentations, which is more than we normally would have as well. But we just have a lot of things that we need to get information on. So I just kind of wanted to share that, to be mindful of the time as we move forward. So we are now on to item 7A. And a reminder, these 3 items are presentations. There's no action being taken on any of the items. So 7A is student enrollment projections for school years 2021 through 2025. And that is Jeremy.
Good evening, board members. Happy New Year. Yes, this item is traditionally brought at this time, as it's a look ahead from our report with our demographer. But just a heads up to the attendees in the audience and the board as well. I'm going to be a little bit shorter tonight, not because I'm going to be speaking fast, because again, I've been reminded several times to speak slowly. as courtesy to our interpreters. But also we're in the process this year of gathering a lot of information regarding our enrollment as we go into the end of the year. So this will be a little bit of front loading of information, and then my recommendation is that we return with some updated information once we launch our registration and we have a more complete picture of where we're what we're looking for, especially as we roll into next year. So if you give me one moment to share my screen. Excellent. So hopefully everyone could see. The enrollment projection is based off of our demographer's report, which was included in the board agenda, and it's quite lengthy, 64 pages, I believe, or something to that effect. But we made a shift last year based off of some feedback from the board and cabinet that we want to put the report into context, the data into context. We want to avoid the temptation to live within the report where we kind of hang on every number or kind of look at different try to identify trends and patterns within the report. Even though the report is based off of sound methodology and data, it really is just a best projection of what enrollment's going to be. And there's so many different variables out there. We want to make sure that we keep that in context. So tonight we're going to look at some of the big picture trends, and again, what we do with this data. And again, I think we would be best all served if I came back again for a short update in the later in the spring with once we have time to make meaning of our registration information that's starting to come in. So we do use previous enrollment data. So those are our known existing enrollment. The projection data provided by the demographer's report, which is based off of birth trends and zip codes, and there's a whole methodology, so I won't go into that. But the more important thing is what we actually utilize with the data. So we utilize it for staffing, for planning for next year as we look at grade level enrollment site by site. In addition, facilities is a component of the number of students and staff that we have to serve. So this data is utilized for our facility planning. And then obviously for program and policies such as decisions as our programs of choice, et cetera, which is a little apropos that we have the Juntos middle school program on tonight. So digging into the enrollment projection report first, these are the major highlights that we have, and I wanted to just cover right off the bat. So the first bullet says the total projected enrollment declines by 139 students next year, and then by 134 more the following year for a cumulative decline of 273. So this is consistent with the demographer's report last year, which did project kind of a steeper decline for now, and then we kind of flatten out, which is the second bullet where further reductions by only another 149 students is forecasted from the next 3 years after. So a much slower rate. So that's actually consistent given the birth data, and that's kind of repeating last year. So from last year, so I wanted to make sure I pointed out that pattern. However, the projected loss in the next 60 months, so that's the 5 years, is less than the decline that occurred from last year to this year alone. So I know that's something that's on everyone's mind because of our dip in enrollment. So in addition, key areas to this declining enrollment, and I just want to caution us all that this is all anecdotal at the moment because there's so many variables happening and our enrollment right now is a little bit fluid. But we did experience I would say extreme sounds really big, but a pretty dramatic decline in our TK and K enrollment at the beginning of this year. In addition, the decrease in advancement rates from previous enrollment. So he's projecting what advancement rate means from 1 year to the next. So this year's kindergartners will become next year's first graders. Utilizing his analysis, the demographer's utilizing his analysis is showing a little bit more loss of students between cohorts from year to year. Don't panic, that's not advancement rates like by grade level because of academics. I just want to make that very clear. The demographer had a poor choice of words. And then low student generation rates from new housing in general. And that's a consistent theme given across the Bay Area, given the cost of living, that even with the generation rates from new housing, I guess it's a little bit obviously cost prohibitive. So the number of students being generated from those units is lower than in other areas. So other highlights of the demographer's reports, including the impacts of COVID-19, we did experience a larger decline this year as compared to other districts. But I do want to just put this in the context that if you recall, we were declining in prior years while other districts around us were actually experiencing more severe. So it kind of balances out if you want to think about that. So I don't want to say it was our turn, but the demographer would always say that you can only lose so many students at so many times, right? Because you can only experience dramatic drops. So we were pretty steady while other districts around us were declining, and then we had our big dip this year. But again, the cause of this decline this year is unknown. So that's something I want to make sure we have time to analyze and bring back. We have some theories, but in addition, he's projecting a wider variance. And that's something that's kind of important relating to staffing, because if we have a fluctuation in enrollment throughout the year, we have to identify the staffing and make sure we have enough staff to accommodate the highest point of, of our student enrollment. All right, this is the favorite chart from the demography report because it kind of gives the district-wide overview. The top part, 2015 to 2019, is based off of actual enrollment. Actually, even 2020 is actual enrollment. I want to point out that we try to be as consistent as possible. So we always try to pull the CBEDS date, which is a significant date that the state pulls data, which is the first Tuesday in October. So we try to do a apples to apples comparison from year to year. So that's why it says early October. And then the 5-year projection is based off of all of the methodology that the demographer has included in his report. So the 3 areas I wanted to point out is highlighted. So the little number 1 box. So this is the decline that he was outlining, where we experienced at the end of last year, we had grades TK to 8. We had 6,439 students. I am unclear if you can see my pointer, but I'm circling it here. Excellent. This is the big decline that we experienced. So we had a sudden decline of 482 students. Just kind of let that sink in. Primarily, you could see that it is in this TK and K. We were down a transitional kindergarten class this year, as well as 645 has been our lowest, even with the projected declining enrollment in the projected years. This is our lowest actual in quite a while. And you could see it was a 130 student decline from last year's kindergarten class. The bullet point 2 here is just to show that this is the reflection of how the demographer says we have this steeper decline in the next 2 years, and then we start to flatten out where our declining enrollment is still going down, but at a lesser rate. And then this point here, I'm going to try to be very clear. I've been practicing this all night, so bear with me. It's on one hand, the tendency is to think of our enrollment as this one number. And so if we're down 50 kids or up 75, like they're coming from somewhere. But majority of districts are experiencing declining enrollment because of a structural deficit. And what I mean by that is if you look at these numbers here, going back to 2015, these students are probably, because they articulate every year, these larger cohorts have come in and we're having vastly lower cohorts entering now. And so even though we might stabilize with birth rates, in the future, as these higher cohorts exit out, we're still going to decline, right? If that makes any sense. So it's sometimes it's a structural baked in thing. So, all right, Bridget is nodding, so I'm going to go with that because, and I'm sure there'll be some questions. But yeah, I practiced that one and that didn't come out right. So, all right. So this is another way. I'm a visual learner, so this is another way to visualize that chart. So this goes back to 2015, and it shows our enrollment over the past 5 years plus our current year in now. So again, we try to do an apples to apples comparison by having the same checkpoint on our enrollment over five data points per year. And you can kind of see going back, we were having this point where we'd start the year, tick up a little bit, and then go down. And then the next year we would start, tick up, go down. So again, you could see how we were still declining, but not as severely as some of our other districts until we hit here. So as a point in time, if you recall, this large uptick was due to the dissolution of the Spark charter program, which then resulted in an influx of students coming in. So that bumped us up in the 18-19 school year, but we then did still see a declining enrollment component. In 1920, we were a little more stable, and then this is where we fell off. So we have 2 data points prior to this presentation. So our 10-day count and then the CBEDS date. Spoiler alert, we're not at the 15th yet. We do dip below 5,900. So just kind of keep that in mind. This chart is important because remember the variance that I was talking about is that we need to make sure that we have enough staff to accommodate the peak as well as the low part of the enrollment period. So you can see we're getting a little more volatile, for a lack of a better word. We're having a larger spread. So that's just something we definitely want to keep an eye on. So next steps is that we're launching registration and open enrollment on February 1st. And we're still tightening up that because if you recall at the end of last year, we had to really revamp our registration process. We had a practice in our district where we started off the registration process at the school sites. Sometimes we'd have lines in front of the school starting at 2 a.m. in the morning. We obviously can't do that now. So we made the switch to an online registration process and we're refining that now. But we really want to see what's coming back in. And the reason for that is the TKK dip we experienced this year temporary? Meaning that folks had discretion in order to hold them back. TK is the first year of a 2-year, or they're non-mandated grade. So maybe the parents were choosing to kind of keep them home just given the fact of the virtual program. Or did they actually leave the area because of cost of living or something to that effect? So we're anticipating a larger first grade, maybe, a K and first grade registration than years past if they're truly still, in the area and going to register with us. So that's something we want to watch. And then will our current year enrollment hold? Because again, like I said, we're dipping below 5,900. I do want to point out one thing if I can go back. Actually, the chart is showing TK to 8th grade. Remarkably, our fantastic preschool program, the enrollment is very steady. I didn't include that because the graph is very boring. It's a straight line or roughly around 150 students. So just keep that in mind. That's preschool. COVID-19 would impact open enrollment. What I mean by that is there going to be a bigger draw over the next year or two just with COVID impacting? So maybe I don't want to drive across town to a different program for the moment. I just want to keep, maybe to my neighborhood program. We want to see if that materializes. And then really, as Mike was well aware, we're starting to enter into our hiring season for the following year, including summer school and next year. So we want to kind of have time to make meeting of that. So I do propose that I bring back another update later this spring in April when we have a little bit more information and are able to make meeting this year, especially because there's so many variances. And so that's the conclusion of my report. I did want to cover that there were a couple questions that I didn't get that weren't able to answer in the prep. One of them is it's the number of rental units versus owners for our smaller townhome units. That information isn't readily available. The best that we'll have is when the 2020 census data comes, because I think they try to correlate that. So stay tuned to that. There was a question about Cherry Chase, because again, they are one of our schools that is showing the declining enrollment. My best answer is it's one of those 4 criteria. It could either be that the TKK students are being held out. Folks have had to move out of the area. And to be honest, sometimes with job transfers and being able to work virtually, we have anecdotal data that folks are able to then move and telecommute from wherever, so they move to a different area. Private school is definitely one of those pieces, or the cost of living is just so hard, like we kind of talked about during the board comment. So there's that. And then the last one was, with kind of the housing mix. So there was the most affordable, relatively affordable, and modest to upper income, and non-residential. Those ranges, I can't give you an arbitrary range of the cost of those units because they're relative to each other. So but what we can do is we took a look at this year versus last year to see if there's a shift into seeing if individuals are having to maybe double up in houses, and we're not seeing that quite yet with the data, but that is definitely something we want to keep an eye on. So yeah, I think it's a lot of anecdotal at the moment, but we're trying to make meaning of kind of with the data that we have in front of us. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jeremy. Public, if there's any comments on this presentation, if you could please use the raise hand feature now. Aaliyah, are you seeing any?
We have one so far. Shall I go ahead?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Dio, you are up.
I would just like to say thank you for providing all the demographer data and past, years of all the board meetings I've attended. It's the data isn't just handed to you so nicely and easy to review through. So thank you for the great improvement, in my opinion, in the availability of the board packet to the public before and during the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Are you seeing any others, Aaliyah?
That looks like it's it.
All right, thank you. Board, is there any questions or comments for Jeremy with the presentation? Bridget, go ahead.
I think the Cherry Chase question might have been mine, but because I definitely was wondering, in one part of the report, it said that Cherry Chase is down 100 students. And then later when they compared housing to like students who would in theory go to school in the Cherry Chase neighborhood and students who were going to Cherry Chase, it said that it was just down by 12. So is that trying to say that like they think that most of the kids who are eligible for to go to Cherry Chase that are going to Cherry Chase, like who are in that attendance area? Like, is the second one really a physical matching of students who live in the attendance area of Cherry Chase and may or may not go there versus how many actually go there?
Yeah, I think that's the difference, because I think you hit it on the head, because the first one has that attendance adjust, and that's, I think, trying to account for pluses and minuses out of the area. The one in the back, the 16 down, I think has to do with birth, you're right, like the number of students in that area. So I think they're related, but they're two separate metric, because they're not going to line up. I think that was the appendix, the other chart, and then the appendix B. So I think
first one is how many were down since last year. And the second one is, are the kids who live in this area pretty much going to that school?
I think that's safe to say, yes. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, board? All right, thank you, Jeremy. I know as they usually, I feel like the numbers are so crazy this year, like they're helpful, but then they're kind of not helpful, right? We really have no clue what things are gonna look like next year, right? So I know it's gonna be a lot trickier figuring out staffing.
Yeah, so again, I appreciate the fact that we're not diving into these numbers right now, because we do need more data and information. So again, more to come. So
yeah, so thank you for all the information, and good luck to you and your team as you are figuring it out. Thank you. All right.
Michelle, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know why it went on mute. I must have accidentally tapped it. All right, we're now on to item 7B, the Juntos Middle School Pathway. And we've got a team I'm handing over to, so I don't know who's starting first. So go.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. Good evening. My name is Ron Hammond. I am the coordinator of curriculum, instruction, and assessment.
And hello, my name is Esteban Ibarra, and I'm the proud principal at San Miguel Elementary.
Buenas noches. My name is Daniel Po. I'm the principal at Columbia Middle School.
So good evening again to our board members, Dr. Gallagher and Superintendent's Cabinet. Thank you for this opportunity to present information about the Juntos Spanish Dual Language Immersion Program at CMS and our recommendations for your consideration. The why. As educators, we always start with the impact on student learning. The research shows that students in strong dual language programs begin to outperform students in traditional bilingual educational models by the beginning of 4th grade. Overall, research demonstrates that students who are enrolled in successful dual language programs have better long-term educational outcomes than their peers who are not enrolled, in dual language models. Next slide, please. The work has been anchored in our Juntos program mission. It is our commitment to develop bilingual and biliterate students who will be confident and compassionate leaders who are prepared for rigorous academic life challenges. Slide, please.
Last year, our San Miguel Juntos and Columbia Middle School leadership teams researched several successful dual immersion programs across the state to inform our process in developing our middle school model. Our new San Miguel and Columbia Middle School leadership have continued the data gathering process and program planning by backwards mapping high school requirements to ensure our program prepares our students for advanced placement Spanish and other advanced courses. These two models were explored and presented to the board last year for consideration. Here are some of the highlights of the pros and cons, the competing interests, if you will, that surfaced for consideration for a K-8 campus at San Miguel Elementary School. Next slide, please. And similarly, for a Juntos cohort at the middle school. In reviewing the positive impacts on students, on staff and families, and the advantages of students having access to after-school clubs, sports, and electives, we are recommending option B, the Juntos Spanish Dual Immersion Program at Columbia Middle School.
And along with that model, we did take a careful consideration of whether we would need a 0 period or a 7th period. And in years prior, we had surveyed staff and parents about a possible earlier bell start, and there was interest there. So the other component to this about the recommendation for a 0 period is that it allows our Juntos students to also participate in extracurricular activities after school, whereas a 7th period would hinder them. So we have thought about the model, about what it would look like in 7th and 8th grade year as the program expanded. For the purpose of this presentation, we're just going to focus in on 6th grade. As you can see, our 6th grade Juntos students would take Spanish during a 0 period class. So that would be their Spanish immersion, Spanish language arts, what happened 0 period. Then they would continue their study in social studies, which would be taught in Spanish. And then they would continue their day just like a regular 6th grade student at Columbia with their English language arts, math. They would have the option to take an elective at CMS, and then science. So this is a student facing kind of schedule, and it's what it would typically look like. There could be some variance depending on their elective, but overall that's kind of their day. So we were also wondering how many cohorts, well, at least we were, how many cohorts would be coming in. So we know it's going to be 2 cohorts coming in from San Miguel. So we could really kind of ignore that first model for now on the left-hand side and look at the teacher assignments with 2 cohorts. So we would need a multi-subject teacher that is able to teach Juntos social studies and ELA. So ELA still in English, but the social studies curriculum would be taught in Spanish. A Spanish teacher would be needed to teach 0 period 6th grade, but then because we have 2 cohorts, they would also need to teach Spanish, 2 sections of Spanish for 7th grade Juntos as the program grew, and same thing for 2 sections of Spanish 8, which leaves us with no CMS Spanish. So it's something that we are going to have to consider for the future. How do we provide that general education, our non-Juntos students with a Spanish elective option? And then at CMS, we do have a teacher that's willing to support us in the Juntos program that teaches social studies, that's is willing to teach the 0 period Spanish language arts component, and then also teach social studies 7 and 8 in Spanish as the program grows. So we were fortunate enough to have the opportunity, as Ron mentioned, to speak with the Freeman World Language Department Chair. And it's actually funny because Israel Gonzalez is his name. And I actually hired him as a first-year teacher at my last school site. So it's kind of cool to be able to work with him again. So we sat and really looked at what is the expectation for our students to get there. And he's really excited because this is kind of the pathway that we're thinking our students going to follow. In 6th grade, they would take Spanish language arts. In 7th grade, they would take Spanish 2 for heritage speakers. And in 8th grade, they would take Spanish 3 heritage speakers, which has a heavy focus on literature. And the impact that it does have in high school is our 9th grade Juntos students could be eligible to take AP Spanish language. Doesn't mean they have to take it their freshman year, but it provides them that opportunity to take it then. So Mr. Gonzalez was really excited about that opportunity. So considerations for staffing for Juntos, we do have 2 bilingual administrators, myself and Dr. Teramoto, to do with the program monitoring and supporting. We did hire this year a bilingual 6th grade teacher, and we also hired our Spanish teacher for this year. And as I mentioned, I was able to talk to Mr. Zaipien, and he agreed to help us with the bilingual 7th and 8th grade social studies component of the Juntos program. Because we did have those considerations. At first, we were looking at what staffing were we going to need. So thanks to Mary Beth guiding me and letting me know, hey, don't forget Juntos is coming. And so you might want to start thinking about hiring early. So we were able to do that because Juntos does take 7 periods. It is going to have an impact on our schedule. And so with that 0 period means there's an additional assignment that the Spanish teacher would have to take, and also the social studies teacher, because there's 2 cohorts, which means we have a total of 6 cohorts. So that 3, you can ignore that 3. We know we have 2 cohorts coming in. So that's the component. We're lucky that we've already hired our B-clad multi-subject teacher, because now they could be a part of the planning in the spring as we work to transition Juntos from 5th grade over to our 6th, over to Columbia.
And here's a timeline of the work ahead. Later this week, we have the parent informational session. Raising Juntos 6th graders to meet their teachers. In between that time, Mr. Poe will be working on solidifying the master calendar.
Sorry, could you repeat that? You cut out for a second there. Sorry.
Yeah, so this is just the timeline for some of the work ahead. Later, the parent informational session. Meet and greet sometime in May for Rising 6th grade Juntos students to meet their teachers. In between that time, Mr. Poe will be working on master calendar, making sure that's solidified, and curriculum and assessments as well.
So the cost factors. So this is something that I have to really take a close look at. As we grow out, there might be the need for an additional full-time teacher, maybe possibly 2, as I showed in the model. If our Spanish teacher is teaching only Juntos programs, then I think we'd still want the option of our non-Juntos students taking a Spanish course. So we would have to look into that. In terms of curriculum, would be piloting and looking at what curriculum we're going to be adopting. Developing the assessments is going to take time and money. Any technology needs and licenses that the program might need. As we move forward, possibly looking into a bilingual coach to support the dual immersion program. Professional development, not only for teachers, but for myself, Dr. Teramoto, and the other administrators, anyone that's going to be involved with it. Other additional materials that we need to think about, and then a library collection in Spanish, which thanks to the Assistance League of Los Altos, we've already started on this because they gave us a nice donation this year. So I already have my LRC person ordering books for the collection.
And I want to bring our attention to the assessments piece. In addition, the Spanish language arts assessment is aligned to our Pathway to the Seal of Biliteracy program. So students in 5th grade will take the Avant Stamp 4 Spanish language arts assessment as a means of identifying Spanish language progress. And the assessment will continue in middle school. So here are some of our immediate next steps for our team. I want to bring our attention here to the open enrollment. It's important to note that parents and guardians will need to enroll their incoming 6th grade students into the Juntos program at Columbia Middle School. during the open enrollment period that Jeremy had referenced earlier, starting on February 1st, and that 10-day school day window. And the information will be communicated both through our district as well as at parent events, parent meetings, and communiques sent via Sunnyvale directly. So on behalf of the fabulous principal team here tonight, Mr. Ibarra and Mr. Poe, we want to thank you. The next slide, Principal Poe, we are open to questions, please.
And if I can just jump in real quickly here. Thank you for this great presentation. You know, a year ago, we had 2 different principals at the 2 schools, 2 fabulous principals who were, you know, Mrs. Ballantyne, who I can see on the panel here, and of course, Ms. Allman at CMS. And they've both moved on, and we have 2 unbelievably incredible principals who are so committed to this program moving forward. And I know this has been a strong, strong interest of the district and certainly the board for many years, and it's exciting to be moving in this direction. So that's fantastic. I want to talk to the board just about a couple of things. And first of all, we strongly recommend the proposal that the team has put together. There's a couple of considerations I want you to think about. And it isn't so much about this, because as I said, we strongly recommend the 7-period day for the Juntos program, because that allows these students to have the option of a elective at the middle school level. As a board, I think we need to look at this through perhaps 2 additional lenses. One of them is the financial lens, and the team did a good job of pointing that out. That will require at least 1 additional FTE. So this group of students would be getting an additional period of education. Again, I think it's justified, but there's an extra cost to that, okay? And it's 1 unique group of kids. The other thing is, if we look at it through an equity lens, that's the lens we want to look through things. We are providing an opportunity for kids to become bilingual, and I think that's a strong interest of our board and our district. Once we open this door, and I'm saying this as a former middle school principal who worked at a school where the kids had, some kids had 2 electives and some kids didn't. Once we open this door, there's the possibility that other interest groups may ask for an additional elective. And so we would want to apply an equity lens in those situations. And so we can see that coming. We don't have unlimited money, so we want to use that equity lens. So I feel like I need to let you know that as a board as we look at this. Also, we were thoughtful about bringing this to you as a presentation, because we want to get the questions, feedback, and then the team would bring this back in maybe not as full of a presentation, unless that's what the board want, for final approval at a later date. So there's more time to make adjustments if that's necessary. So with that, I think we're ready for questions.
Actually, Mike, I apologize. Michelle, can I jump in? There was one late breaking news. Ron, I apologize. I didn't get a chance to update you. In an effort to remove friction from 5th grade to 6th grade articulation, it's more of an opt-out. We're not going to require the Juntos track would continue unless they want to opt out to go back to their comprehensive program. So we're trying to just make that easier.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, team, and thank you for those additions. Public, is there any comments on this presentation? And then we'll move to the board after that. So if there's any comments, public, please use the raise hand feature now.
All right, first up we have Rachel and then Debbie Headley.
Hi, my name is Rachel Hirota, and I am also a teacher. And my children have been in Spanish immersion since kindergarten, but in a different area. This is actually their first year here in Sunnyvale. So my oldest son is in 8th grade, so he missed out on continuing his Spanish immersion through the 8th grade, so that was very unfortunate. So I'm super happy that my other 2 younger children are going to be able to have this opportunity all the way through the 8th grade, and then at AP and high school. I think it's so important, and I really appreciate what you're doing here. I'm guessing you're probably not going to answer my questions, but I'm going to ask them anyway, just so they're out there. I'm curious as to what time the 0 period starts. I'm wondering if there is a desire to grow the Juntos program, or do you like it just the size that it is? If you are wishing to grow it, I'm wondering what kind of promotion is being done in the area, because I think a lot of times, for lack of a better word, there's just ignorance about what immersion is. A lot of times people have a misconception, both English speaking people and Spanish speaking people. And so I'm curious as to if there's a desire to make the program bigger, what kind of promotion and education is being done in the county. I'm wondering if students are testing for the biliteracy seal in the 8th grade. You did mention that, and I wasn't quite sure. I knew you said something about starting testing in 5th grade. I'm not completely clear on what all of that is. And then I'm also wondering, is this just a proposal, or is this a solid thing that is definitely happening next year? So those are my thoughts. And I, again, just am so thankful that you are doing this, and to everybody who is making this happen. As a monolingual person who is highly educated, I always feel like the dumbest person in the room when I am around people who speak English and Spanish. Doesn't matter how many master's degrees I have. So I'm just so thankful my children are going to have a better opportunity than I do. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And then next up is Debbie Headley. My apologies. Thank you, Christina, for the correction. And then after Debbie is Lori Thomas.
So much for taking these comments and questions. I'm Debbie Headley. I am a parent of 2 Juntos students at San Miguel. I have a 5th grader and a 3rd grader. So this will definitely impact my family for next year and the coming years. I just want to start by saying how appreciative and grateful we are to the district and the board's commitment to the Juntos program. It is such an incredible gift that we can give to our children to be literate and bilingual, and we're just so grateful for the opportunity. It's a wonderful program. I do have some questions. I am so pleased to hear that the program will be continuing at Columbia Middle School. That was my preference as a parent. And as you saw on those pros and cons slides, the reason it was so important to me as a parent that it was at Columbia rather than staying at San Miguel was to provide our students with the opportunity to have a full middle school experience, be able to participate in the electives like band and after school athletics. And I think that's really important. But one of the other positives for me of my son going to Columbia and being in Juntos is that he'll be able to meet new students and expand his peer group. So one of my questions is, in terms of the master schedule, if my Juntos student will be in a Juntos Spanish class and a Juntos social studies class, will that lock him into being in ELA and math and science with that same cohort of students just based on how the master schedule plays out? So I'm hoping that there's flexibility so they get that benefit of meeting and mixing with new students. And then I also have a question similar to the last speaker about the time. And also what I haven't seen is a schedule that includes advisory for next year. So I'm wondering if advisory will continue and what that will do to the school schedule. And also just with knowing about Senate Bill 328 and the the rules for a later start time for middle schools, not starting before 8 a.m. I know that doesn't include a 0 period, but I'm just wondering how early is that 0 period? Because I think the spirit of the law is very important for the health and welfare of our students, not to start too early. So I'm curious what that 0 period start time would look like. Again, thank you so much for your commitment to this program, and I look forward to hearing further answers as we move forward.
Thank you, Debbie. And then next up is Lori, Thomas, and then Selena.
Hi, thank you so much. I think I'm going to repeat what basically Debbie said. I am super appreciative that my daughter got to go to San Miguel and join the Juntos program in first grade. I am so looking forward and excited that she's going to get to go to Columbia next year. I am also concerned about the 0 period and what time that starts at. And I'm looking forward to her mingling with other kids. There's 3 other schools that will come into the school, and I think she will participate in after school activities and want to be mingled with other kids. And I do think that we think of this as a period where some of our kids get to go in and learn Spanish, and it's great for their equality and their education. But I will say that the majority of the children that, so I have a younger son that's in 2nd grade, but the majority of the children that go there are of Spanish or Hispanic background. And they are learning it not because it's an advantage. It is an advantage, but it's also because they want to speak and write and learn in proper Spanish. I think that we need to think of our equity lens outside of our own, where we come from. So anyway, I appreciate everything that's done, and I'm looking forward to next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. And that actually is the last one. Oh, there's Selena. She lowered her hand. There's Selena. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's interesting to see what's going on in the district, even if it's not in my neighborhood. I was curious about the non-immersion language options at CMS, since I'm not familiar with CMS. And I was curious whether or not language classes were being offered in 6th and 7th grades at CMS that are non-immersion. I know I was a little disappointed that the language options at SMS were only Spanish in 8th grade and not offered in 6th and 7th grade. And I'm wondering if there's an effort to bring language classes to 6th and 7th grades in middle school that are not a Juntos immersion type program.
Thank you. All right, that was the last one.
Thank you, Aaliyah, for your help with that. Thank you for those who shared as well. I would say, I think there's a balance between, I'm sure there's a lot of specific detail questions that parents who are going to be in it will get answered on January 26th, but I think some of that is still good to address here. The few that I would love to hear a little bit about, I think, is the idea of what time is 0 period, and that balance of we want them to be able to have the full experience, but then also starting too early, right? That defeats the science of those kids not getting up to date. So if you could address that, and then I have a question about based on that, the availability of students who were not in our Juntos program, but maybe were doing some sort of other dual language somewhere else, but are living here. Will they have opportunity to get in? And then also that idea of, I didn't quite understand when you're showing the examples. So that question also that some of them brought up of some of the classes will for sure be with Juntos, but then will it still allow them to mix with other students who aren't in Juntos, or will they be kind of set into this one class, group of kids? So let's maybe go with those, and then I know the board has their own questions and maybe other questions from the public comments. So I don't know which one of you will address those, or you'll bounce back and forth.
Yes, great.
Ron, do you want to start, Ron, or do you want?
Yes, great. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate the questions, and we appreciate the comments from everyone that spoke earlier. So with the 0 start and the time frame there, I think that it will be important as we as a team and a district look at the start times for our middle schools as we move forward to next school year. We will be speaking about middle school later this evening, but I'm particularly speaking to the possibility of maybe starting just a little bit later, so that that early 0 period could be pushed back maybe to 7:30, but that has to be worked out. We have to look at scheduling, and there's a lot of conversation that will go into that. So I think taking this back to the team is really important, Michelle, and bringing it back forward with a solid possible recommendation is something that we will do as a next step. Because I agree, it's important, certainly. The second question that you addressed around, I apologize. The second question was the.
You're good. The availability for those who aren't in
Right.
our Juntos.
You're right. And as it is now with the Juntos program at the elementary level, when students come into the program that aren't starting in, there is a process, right, that we go through to make sure that we are respecting the choice that the student and parent are making, as well as making certain that we're supporting the entrance or even an exit from a program, right? And there are certain protocols that we follow, assessments that we draw from that help inform that decision. And there would be a similar process. I'm thinking as we move forward in the middle school as well. And we would develop that process as we finalize the program. And I think that Danielle can speak to I think the third question was regarding the cohort itself and how they go through their other classes or courses rather outside of the Juntos to Spanish immersion classes.
Yes.
Principal Poe?
So in terms of the cohort, in 6th grade, it's pretty simple because we follow a cohort model. So if you start off with the teacher in an afternoon, you stay with them, and then you stay in the you go to, say you have Ms. Davalos for English and social studies, then you have Mr. Perez for science and math. So because we're in the cohort model, they are going to stay with the same group of kids in 6th grade, where they have the option, where they're going to have the ability to mix with other students that might not necessarily be in the cohort. I mean, in the Juntos program, will be in their elective classes and their PE classes. So that's the first component of that. But as they move on through 7th and 8th grade, because of where the electives that they select and their PE, it's also going to be there, but schedules get a little bit trickier in 7th and 8th grade, so they might mingle more there. But still, the main part where they will be with other students outside their cohort most likely will be PE and electives. I'm glad someone brought up advisory. So that is, it's something that we rolled out at CMS this year. I really love the program. I know we've gotten some positive feedback from students and from families. So I do have a bell schedule committee at CMS that we're going to be looking at how can we fit in everything that we want to do into our bell schedule while applying the new 0 period as well. So as we progress forward, I know I have parents here, like continue coming to my, it's a plug, my parent guardian nights every first Thursday of the month at 6 p.m. Right, we're doing we do educational systems present. So I'm thinking forward, we'll probably present a lot more of this information through that avenue. And then in terms of Spanish language, for non-immersed kids at CMS, we do have Spanish available to our 7th and 8th graders at the moment. Not for 6th, but for 7th and 8th we do.
Great, thank you. And then I think earlier, Nancy, did you have some questions or comments? And then I think Isabel after that.
Yes, I had some questions. A lot of kids want to engage in music programs, and it's not clear to me with the scheduling, whether or not they'll be able to access that as an elective, especially in the 6th grade component.
If you refer back to the slide on there, you see in 6th grade that they actually do have an elective there. So just
right, but it's the timing that aligns with the classes.
Because if they start, so because we have 2 cohorts, right? The first cohort is going to start off with social studies, which means they will have, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it's a 5th period elective, if that's the case. But when I build the schedules, I load the request in, and because elective only happens once, it's prioritized a little bit higher. So if they wanted to take a music class, band or orchestra are also offered in different periods. One's offered I believe 5th and one's offered 6th. So it would match them accordingly. There might be some constraints that sometimes are hard to fix, but they will have that option to take band or orchestra or even choir.
Awesome, because I know that those are very strong programs and highly desired options at the campus. The other question that I had that wasn't necessarily answered completely, are you going to be testing everybody this year as they exit 5th grade? Is that the intention for their competency for the seal of biliteracy?
Thank you, Nancy. So yes, we will be testing students with the assessment in Spanish language arts, because as we know with this model, students start their English language arts in 3rd grade, and the expectation is through 6th grade they become more fluent in English language arts. So with Spanish language arts, we will definitely have that assessment for the spring for our students at 5th grade currently. And then as we move the pathway program forward into the middle school setting, we will then include the English proficiency exams that will match with the CASP, as well as by 8th grade, they will have to have completed the LPAC with an overall 4, which is the assessment that the state requires by the time they're in 12th or 11th grade for the seal of biliteracy. So that piece is determined in high school, but we want to prepare our students in a respectful way, and the choice was made, well, we're thinking that the choice will be made not to include the LPAC overall 4 in 5th grade, because they're just really starting their English program. So the 5th grade pathway for the seal is in Spanish language arts, and then in 8th grade will culminate with the English language arts. So both of those assessments will be made before they exit our middle school program.
Okay. Are you anticipating or can we add into planning the option for Native heritage speakers who have not been in the program to still access these checkpoints of their fluency as we move forward with this program, so that they also can look at high school as an opportunity to be more directed if they want to pursue that seal of biliteracy competency when they exit high school.
So Nancy, I'm going to, just for clarification, kind of read back the question. So what you're asking me is, will there also be a pathway for students that are not in the dual language program? And there will be. It will not be in it is not anticipated to be in our 1st year rollout for the pathway, but it will come in that 2nd year, where we will include the criteria for the pathway for students that are not in the dual language program.
Okay. And then I also had a question about the AP class offerings in Spanish at the high school. There are 2 different AP Spanish classes. One has more of a literature, well, both of them use the word literature in them. One has more of a literature focus and the other's more cultural competency and Spanish literature focus. Which AP classes were you referring to that they could take at the ninth, had the potential of taking at ninth grade?
So I could take this one, Ron.
Thank you.
At Fremont, currently they only offer AP Spanish language.
Okay.
And there's because the reason why Mr. Gonzalez was so excited was this might push them over the hump, where now they're also offering AP Spanish lit, but that's still years to come and out of our.
No, that's fine.
Yeah,
Look,
it's
right.
AP
Okay.
Spanish language.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions.
I'm just really also just excited about how things are moving forward and options for students and families in our community, and the value that we place on biliteracy is so important.
Thanks, Nancy. Isabel?
Yes, I was wondering about the Flex program, that second elective that kids at Columbia have. How is that working with the whole scheme? Now that they're having an extra class, which is Spanish, are you still doing the Flex program? I know it's a shorter class, but are they taking Spanish instead of that?
So no, they would still have the option of an additional flex, but we're actually just kind of brainstorming that as well, because flex is flexible, right? It's an additional enrichment, but it's also intervention. So if a student who was in Juntos program was struggling with Spanish language arts, that also provides us an opportunity to possibly provide Spanish language intervention during that time. So they would still have the option of a flex. And because we have flex, advisory, and now Juntos, that's where the planning of the master schedule is going to be very crucial over the next couple of, I'm going to honestly say weeks. I've already started thinking about it. So it's already kind of spinning in my head. I just got to put it on paper.
Thank you.
I have a quick something.
Yeah, go ahead, Bridget.
So, you know, I know the Juntos is unique to CMS, or would be, you know. So I think that there's a lot of creative things going on with scheduling at CMS. And I know that recently you've been working with SMS. I mean, I'm sure they've always worked together, but it seems like there was some trying to get in sync of schedules with SMS. Are we still, I mean, even though SMS would not have a Juntos program, like I hear what you're saying about getting advice. SMS doesn't have advisory or flex or other things. So are those still like, do you still have like a lot of, are you going to be working together at all, like kind of cross discussion about some of the other things that kind of have to work? Does Juntos have to work in the framework of these two schools working together? Like, is that going to be?
I think there's already collaboration between Pat Carpio and my current teachers, Claudia Dumpson. So that's already starting the works. And in terms of everything else with the core content, there's always been that collaboration. And Ron has actually been spearheading that this year with social studies, ELA, and I know math. So that collaboration is still continuing.
Okay.
But the difference is when we think of equity, right? There's stuff that that the Flex program offers that we need for our EL students at Columbia. We need to be able to provide that intervention course there for them, rather than them not taking an elective. So that's big on my plate.
And Bridget, SMS has an advisory this year with the virtual. I don't think they didn't have before, but there's an advisory at SMS this year.
Yes, and I believe we're also using the same second step curriculum in there as well for social emotional learning.
Thanks.
All right, board, any other questions, final questions? All right, thank you so much, team, for all the work. We know this has been years in the planning and you guys are kind of finishing up the work and moving it forward. So we appreciate all that you're doing and look forward to kind of seeing what the final plans are as that gets finalized. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight too.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We're going to take a brief 5-minute break. And then when we come back, we will do our final presentation, the middle school reopening schedules. So it is 8:41, so we'll try to start back at about 8:46. Thank you, everybody. All right, looks like we're all here. So we are now on to item 7C, the middle school reopening schedules. And I think we're turning it over to Mala and team.
Yes, and thank you so much, Michelle. The first person on my team, I believe, who's starting us off on the presentation is Dr. Gallagher.
Thank you. So I have just a couple things to say as a way of introduction, and I appreciated that Mr. O'Brien used the word lollygagging because that's one of my favorite words. And I can assure you that the team has not been lollygagging as they prepared the middle school in-person plan. They've actually been working on this for several months, and it's complicated. Middle school scheduling. You got a little glimpse of it with the Juntos schedule that we're up in front of you, and we're fortunate to have Mr. Poe here, who is really an expert on middle school scheduling. But middle school scheduling is very complex. And then if you add on that the complexities of the safety precautions that have been given to us by the state and the county, that created a lot of challenges for creating a program for in-person instruction. So that's why it took a little bit longer. As it's turning out, it looks like we're going to be able to put it on the same starting, unfortunately, because of the delays in getting out of the purple zone or purple tier. But we ended up putting the 6th grade at least on the same starting timeline as KN1. So the other thing I could say is that to cut through the challenges of the scheduling and the different safety constraints that are caused by the coronavirus and the state and county guidelines, we decided to go back to a lens of equity. And so once we did that and thought of who do we need to, who most needs access to in-person instruction, that kind of broke open the floodgates and allowed us to further our planning. So you'll see that this is really focused on those students who have not been able to access learning in the virtual environment, and it's really focused on 6th grade. So that's intentional, and it allows us to do something as opposed to getting locked up in a scheduling knot that would keep us from moving forward. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the team to get started. I see they have my favorite slide up there about the 4 principles that are guiding our work. And so who goes after me, Mala?
Christina.
Christina, okay.
All right, thanks so much, Mike, for the introduction, and Mala. So to work on the middle school model, we really use the same guiding principles that we had for our elementary schools. So balancing our instructional needs with health and safety of all of our stakeholders. Like Mike said earlier, really looking at equitably meeting student needs, and then ease of adaptability if we have to move back and forth between models. So our agility to be able to move between programs. Next slide. So for middle school, like Mike said, we've been working on this since the beginning of the year, just looking at the unique challenges of middle school scheduling. So we're currently in phase 1, where we're working to build community, capacity for learning for our students, and opportunities for our middle schoolers to socialize. We know that how important that is for our early adolescents. So both school sites have supervised learning groups at their schools, and both principals, thank you, Mr. Poe and Ms. Edwards, are working on starting up their after-school supports. So that's the process of looking at our staff offering on a limited basis enrichment opportunities for students, and then having students respond and be interested. My own middle schooler is very excited about the archery frisbee option that has been out there. So it's an opportunity for our students to have additional contact with adults and with each other, but in a safe way and socially distanced way. So that's where we are currently with phase 1. Again, we're in the process of developing the after school supports. Phase 2 is this next piece that we're looking at. So how do we provide in-person learning and support for our students who need it the most? So really the equity model. We worked on a lot of different options based on the unique structure of middle school with multiple teachers and bell schedules. And although this doesn't have an in-person instructional option for all students, it does have the in-person option for the students who need it the most. And really, we wanted to focus on those students. So for our sixth graders that need it, we're focusing on an in-person instructional model that we'll look at in a little bit. And for our seventh and eighth graders who need additional support, expanding the supported learning groups for them so they have support on site. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth, who's going to talk about safety.
So we're not going to go into great detail with the layers of safety because they'll have the same layers of safety that we discussed in detail when we talked about the elementary model. So we will continue with our testing, screening, PPE, physical distancing, disinfecting, and ventilation that we talked about in great length with the elementary school. But we did just want to put this here as a reminder that safety is always paramount and always a focus. Just to revisit the timeline, this is referring back to the timeline that was presented before break. We're back from holiday break. The plan was to continue to work with our COVID testing program, which is in process. And like Ms. Ballantyne said, we are in phase 1 with the SLGs and other supports. The goal is to expand those supervised learning groups, so to add more learning groups at each site, beginning on Thursday, January 21st. And then again, referring to Dr. Gallagher's comments earlier, our in-person classes for 6th grade depend on when we go into the red tier. So this is just an attempt to explain a little bit, a few of the challenges of middle school scheduling, just so you have some foundation. So one of the things we're looking at here is we're looking at staff availability and staff readiness and the number of staff we need to support a cohort of students. And then as we're looking at capacity, so in-person capacity for cohorts. So if you look at the elementary column, you'll see that for a cohort of students to come and receive instruction in their core subjects, they need one teacher. An elementary teacher teaches them all 4 of their core subjects. Currently, in the virtual model, a teacher who's in the primary grades has a max of 24 students in their class. And then the upper grades, 4th and 5th, a max of 32. When elementary moves to in-person, they're able to serve 12 students in the AM and 12 students in the PM. So 24 total students. So there's no discrepancy between the number of students they can serve virtual and in-person for the primary grades. For the upper grades, there might be a little bit of a discrepancy if they're able to serve 24 in person. And again, those in-person numbers depend on the size of the room and how we can implement social distancing, the 6-foot requirement. So in the 4th and 5th grade, there might be a need to accommodate 8 students in the virtual classes that can't be accommodated in the in-person class. When we move to 6th grade, it starts to get a little bit more complicated because in order for a cohort of students to come back, they need 2 teachers, one ELA and social studies teacher and one math and science teacher who don't have any at-risk conditions that prevent them from coming to an in-person assignment. Each of those teachers has a max capacity in virtual of 32 for a total of 64 students. But in-person, because they're teaching, they'll be teaching half of their class and we can't have an AM PM model at the middle school. So they're only able to serve 15 students, each of those teachers, for a total of 30, which means there are 34 students that will have to, when those teachers move to in-person, 34 of their students will have to be dispersed into other virtual classes. So we have to have room for those students in those other classes, which can sometimes be a constraint. So if you take that cohort and multiply it, if you want to open more than one cohort, you'd have to go from 2 teachers to 4 teachers for 2 cohorts, 6 teachers, and so on. Then it gets even more complicated when we move to 7th and 8th grade, where they move to single subject teachers, where to bring back one cohort of students, you have to have a teacher who teaches ELA, a different teacher teaching math, different for social studies, and different for science. So you have to have 4 teachers who don't have any conditions that prevent them from returning to in-person. Each teacher can have 35 max in their class in virtual, and in person still 15. And again, that could also range from 12 to 15 depending on class size, but we're gonna go with the max. And then they would serve 60 students, which would mean we would have to find room in the virtual classes for 80 students, which can be a constraint. So both having 4 teachers in the subjects we need who don't have conditions that prohibit them from coming to school, and finding the space in the virtual classes for the remainder of the students are just a few of the challenges, not to mention challenges of sort of single subject courses like specific electives like AVID or advanced math and things like that. So this is just to give kind of a picture, because we keep saying middle school is complicated, and we just wanted to give you some insight as to why it's complicated and what makes it more difficult.
So we've been able to give some background and context. We want to focus back down to what the 6th grade model will look like. So our 6th grade in-person instructional model is limited and really, again, based on our student needs. So these are students who face challenges accessing learning during virtual learning, not due to the hard work of our staff, but we know that all students don't learn the same way, and some students need different environments. Some of these students may fall into our other categories, so they may have an IEP, they may fall into our targeted groups identified by the LCAP. Our next step is to really look at our student engagement data and see what additional needs they have so we can best support them when they come back to campus. Next slide. So thank you to Mr. Poe and Ms. Edwards and their administrative team. Again, we really started looking at what are our students' needs and what do they need to be able to come, like what do they need in terms of coming onto campus. So both school sites looked at what students needed additional support. So they had student engagement levels of 2 or lower. So we know that we can track our student engagement in virtual learning. And so both teams came up with specific numbers of students that needed additional support. So that's the in-person instruction piece for our 6th grade students. For our 7th and 8th grade students, again, we're looking at SLGs to support their learning in addition to what they're doing virtually. So we looked first at student engagement. Then after that, we looked at the survey staff for workplace readiness to see if we have a match. We were fortunate that both of our sites were able to meet our student needs based on the staff and workplace readiness. And then we looked at how we can balance our school class size and class reconfiguration. So like Mary Beth said, how can we also maintain the classrooms that are happening virtually? We've heard from our parents and our community members that they also want to maintain the teachers that their students have bonded with. So looking at the impact across the school site. So next we're going to look at 2 6th grade examples for both middle schools. And these are examples. So I'm going to walk you through it. Middle school schedules are complicated. Sometimes middle school students understand them better than adults, at least my 8th grader does. But this is a CMS example. So the in-person instruction, our students come onto campus 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. If you're looking at the top and you're seeing the ABs, the AB really refers to period 5 and 6 for our 6th graders, because that's where they have alternating elective PE. And as well as their asynchronous time. So the AB schedule refers to their typical AB schedule, and the way that it's broken up is how it's broken up in virtual school. We focused really on expanding the amount of time that our students have in English language arts and math. We're not saying that the other subject areas aren't important. We just know from a state level, but also from our student data, that these are our 2 subject areas that we want to focus on the most, especially for our students who might not be engaged in the learning that's happening virtually. So the students come onto campus in the morning. They have one cohort of students will have math in the morning. Then during the break time, that's when they would typically have their brunch or break. So they would have an assigned spot in the campus, because again, we want to support safety on campus. Then they come back to the same classroom. The teachers would switch classrooms and they have their ELA block of time. Following that, they pick up their lunch and they go home. Then they have their virtual classes, same as they had before with PE and electives. So again, we're able to maintain the same teachers that they had previously with PE and electives. The alternating period on the AB schedule is asynchronous social studies and science. We have asynchronous listed here. I know there's a question of like how much instructional time would they have in social studies and science. Our middle school teachers typically teach in periods. So period 1 is language arts, period 2 is math. In this model, we're really going to support our middle school teachers who are coming back to campus with designing that time period. So in the 70-minute block, that teacher may be teaching 50 minutes of math and then 20 minutes of science to help them get into asynchronous, more similar to the elementary model. For teachers that might be interested, we also want to support them with developing thematic units, combining math and science together. But again, we want to support our teachers the best way possible and make it manageable and effective for them and their students. After the end of the day, then at Columbia, they continue to have their flex and advisory periods, so we maintain those for the students, and then they have independent work time. Next slide. So the SMS example is similar. We just flipped the courses. The difference between the two sites is the same differences that exist right now in virtual school. So we've said it many times, but this is really based on equity, that what the students need in the afternoons, and not like equality versus both schools having the same pieces. So at SMS, they have a tutorial period instead of the flex and advisory period. This also opens the door for SMS to also do some instruction in social studies, science, and do targeted interventions, which is similar to what is already happening in flex. So I just wanted to point out the difference, but other than that, then the schedules are similar. Slide. So we did an instructional minute comparison. So this is a brief summary. The instructional minutes between the CMS and SMS hybrid models are the same. They're comparable to the hybrid models and the virtual model. So they're similar. And again, we looked at minimal impact across the middle school and the agility to move between models if needed. And just to highlight, again, to summarize, so we're really focusing on our students with the highest need, receiving in-person instruction, and focusing on math and English language arts to the maximum extent possible. Our students maintain their electives in PE with the teachers they had previously in virtual school, and then we're able to maintain flex and advisory at CMS or tutorial at SMS. Our students are assigned asynchronous work in core content areas, all of them, but also social studies and science. And I talked a little bit about how that can also be live. And then we keep and maintain Wednesdays for staff meetings, professional development, and department collaboration. But there also is the advisory for both school sites on Wednesdays, so we maintain interactions between students and teachers.
So in closing, the next steps are continuing our discussions on the middle school work group meetings. I do want to just take this opportunity to thank the administrations both at CMS and SMS and the teacher teams that have been working literally for the past 3 to 4 months in ironing this out, trying to land on a model in a very dynamic situation, because sometimes the rules kept tweaking and conditions kept changing. So we don't want to, I guess to Dr. Gallagher's point, we're not going to we're going to utilize the time that we have, this gift of time as that we're in purple, to further refine the details of these plans. 2 weeks prior to the 6th grade classes being on campus, families of eligible students would receive invitations for in-person instruction. Just to point out, again, this is different than the elementary process where we were offering or polling parent and guardians for their choice. In this case, it'd be a very targeted outreach with that equitable lens. But we do know that there will be sufficient parent outreach, and I've already reached out to both CMS and SMS administrations about planning parent information nights, very similar forums to parents who are going to be invited into this program for their students understand exactly what they're getting into, the expectations. There's a lot involved in that. In addition, we had this conversation when we talked about the reconfiguration at the elementary. There will be a limited number of students in virtual school receiving new schedules as per that great diagram. I'd like to point out that is Mary Beth's brain right there, all on display for us was that staffing chart. And so we did also try to limit the disruption because, again, the schedules are ×6 to what the elementary disruption would be with class reconfiguration. And then as Christina talked about in phase 2, we're continuing to expand the 7th and 8th grade supervised learning groups. Since we're targeting the outreach to the 6th grade students, it allows us to then focus the SLGs at the 7th and 8th grade levels as we move into the spring. So this is just an item for information and kind of to get your questions and feedback. And we know a little bit more detail has to be put in there. But again, want to assure you that the staff and the teachers are already starting to do that planning based off of the outcome of tonight's presentation. So.
Thank you, team. Public, is there any comments on this presentation? If so, please use the raise hand feature. You gonna help with that, Aaliyah? Thank you.
Miss Weber, you are up first, and then Mr. O'Brien, you are next.
Hi, I'm Megan Weber. I am a 6th grade teacher at SMS, and I'm really concerned about the reshuffling of classes that will be required for this reopening plan. Students and teachers have already had to learn a new way of doing school all over again in the last several months, and relearning how to teach and learn again in this in-person environment that will be different than we've experienced before, plus getting to know new students, teachers, and classmates will set these students back weeks. It will overwhelm teachers who are required to teach in person, including probably myself, and will not have time to provide the individual support that students need, specifically probably these students who will be in person. I'm also concerned about the tracking that is inherent in this plan. While I understand that some students will benefit from being in a classroom, putting all struggling students in a class together limits everyone's learning opportunities, including students who remain in virtual classes. Instruction in a classroom right now will have the exact same constraints as a virtual classroom. Students will not be able to use manipulatives, and there will be less able to work together because they will need to be far apart with masks on, so they cannot communicate with each other in the same way that they even can on Zoom. So I don't really see any positives beyond what the SLGs offer to students as having a place to work and having that supervision. I also think that social studies and science are important subjects that deserve to be given time during the school day. Students will not be able to learn these subjects in an entirely independent environment. And at SMS, the tutorial time has been really important for working with small groups and individuals. So I think it's unrealistic to consider that time as potential science and social studies instruction time. Thank you for all the hard work that you have put into creating this schedule. I just wanted to offer my considerations.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. And then next up, Mr. O'Brien.
I'm going to have to be careful how I say this, or I'm probably going to sound awkward. The way it was described for 7th and 8th grade students to return, I hope you guys understand there's kind of some educational coded language there, but I took a lot of that to mean that if a student has an IEP or a 509, if I got the number right, or other such things, they will come on first. It wasn't clear to me how students that don't fall into, I don't know what term I'll use, targeted, whatnot, what the scheduling would be for the entire group of 7th and 8th grade students. So maybe that could be clarified, or you could help me understand the educational language that I should have picked up on, or if that's still in the works and it's not really understood, kind of what the opportunities or schedule will be for everyone in the 7th and 8th grades that is trying to elect to return to in-person.
Thank you very much. And that looks like all the raised hands.
Thank you, Aaliyah. So I think there was just kind of some thoughts for us to consider, which I appreciated those. And then I didn't quite understand, but I think the second question was related to, like, is there in-person for 7th and 8th grade? My understanding, there was not in-person instruction for 7th and 8th grade. We will increase the supervised learning groups to support students who are needing it. Is there something different or clarification? And I don't think it's necessarily based on IEPs or 504s. It's based on recommendations from teacher and staff of students who are needing it, who are not accessing virtual. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good. Michelle, I think the other thing I would say is we remember there's also the after-school supports that will be, and it's social emotional support and academic supports that we're trying to put together. That's another opportunity for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I think the point about it's the kids who would be identified, there are some kids on IEPs who are doing perfectly well. There isn't anything about IEP-ness that necessarily means that they're not engaging. And there are some kids, you know, it ranges across the spectrum. So we're not going to disrupt students. Our goal is to not disrupt students who are engaging already in virtual school.
And the after school opportunities that will be starting, that is generally, I mean, like we can't accommodate everyone if everyone asks for, but that is open to everybody, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Board, is there additional questions or comments? All right, we'll go Bridget and then Isabel.
Okay, so one question I had was, well, you know, I guess when I read it earlier and I asked a bunch of questions, but for some reason I was not getting that. Are we saying that we're not going to be offering a supervised learning group for sixth graders, that this is the option for sixth graders? Will we continue having a supervised learning group for sixth graders? It just means that some of them might opt to go to this other model. Okay, that's good, because I didn't understand that just now. The other thing was, I guess I'm very concerned about the idea of the social studies and science being taught during, like the idea that it would be rolled into English language arts or math, like maybe as part of the curriculum. I understand. I think that we just have to say that, like, because I can't imagine how we're going to, unless we're buying another curriculum or program that's online that is going to support a totally asynchronous way. I think it's going to be really hard to like teach and assess. I know we can do project-based learning and other things, but what I'm hearing from people is that math is really hard to do virtually, and that yes, things go quicker in the in-person classroom, but there is some catching up to do. And I would imagine that the 1 hour that's being given for language arts, you know, as a period, and then the 1 hour for math, all of that could be used up with the standards that the kids are being expected to teach. So I'm worried that we're saying that we're going to be teaching something as asynchronous stuff, and like maybe it's more accurate to call it like topics or something, because it's not going to be the same as taking a class in science and social studies. Would you say that that's true? That this is not like a full science or social studies course? I mean, I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure because if we say that it's going to happen asynchronously during that time, you know, if it's being taught, then we should probably be assessing it, right? And planning it and tracking it. And there's whole grade level standards for social studies and science. So like, I think that puts a lot of pressure on the teachers, because they'll probably still feel like they have to teach this, like that it's still a topic. And so I don't know. I think to do it, it's not exactly virtual. It's just totally asynchronous. It's different than learning. I mean, I don't know. I worry about it, because if we're not assessing it, you know, I don't know. Does my concern coming through? I'm just concerned about the asynchronous part of two whole subjects that we're saying are going to be taught with not allowing any real instructional time. So
no, that makes sense, Bridget. And this is actually where we need to give our teachers a lot of kudos, because when they were thinking about what this might look like, they were thinking about, well, how can I chunk the time so I have some live instructional time for science and social studies that would lead into asynchronous work, so that I can come back and check on it. I think that the difference in the schedules is that at elementary, the teachers are used to adjusting times. So, you know, they have a block of time in 2 hours, and they're used to like saying, okay, today I'm flexibly going to move math and ELA. So this is where we want to support our teachers who are coming back. It is a limited number, because we have a limited number of students who need that support in how to design that instructional time. So we felt like in the schedule, we designed it so it reads asynchronous because that's what it could be. But we also, again, kudos to our teachers who asked to say, how can I teach this live and make the connection to the asynchronous time? So that's our next step in terms of supporting our teachers and supporting our students. At both sites, it looks a little bit different because at CMS, it's one teacher who's already teaching a self-contained group or might be teaching a self-contained group based on staffing. So we're going to be working with the individual teachers to make sure that they have the support they need so our students can get the instructional practice that they need. I know that's not totally answering your question, but that's our next step.
Okay, and then are you thinking that the kids are coming, like, are the kids coming 2 days a week? Or are the kids coming?
They come 4 days a week.
Each student will come 4 mornings a week.
Mm-hmm.
That was my other question. Okay, I might come back to you in a minute. Go ahead.
Okay.
All right, Isabel.
Yes, my question was also about that asynchronous time. How is going to be, like what is going to be taught? Like, I suppose that's because then the kids after lunch, they're gonna go home probably, but these are kids that we are selecting because they have some sort of a benefit to be on class and on person, but they won't then get that benefit. Are they gonna be learning these asynchronous classes in a space similar to the study groups inside the school and with some teachers supervising, or they're just going to go home? Is there a possibility to kids that cannot be picked up in the middle of the morning or 11:30 or something to stay there in the same style as a supervised group to stay the whole day until the parents are available to come later? Like how is that gonna work? Like breaking the day, like after lunch they need to leave and then do synchronous work, but probably they are there because they do need extra help for one reason or another. So what about that extra help they might need afterwards? So that was my question.
I think we can definitely take that into consideration to, as we I think it's all hinged now on the students that actually opt in. But to your point, Isabel, that's great because we can maybe spin up an afternoon SLG for that to bridge that. But again, it would depend on the students who opt in and their needs. But that's definitely a great idea. We made notes of that. So
I'll just put a second to that is right. If they're needing more support, if there's a way for us to be able to support them in the afternoon. That I liked Isabel's idea.
Michelle, I've underlined the note. Reads, okay, all right. I apologize, I brought that upon myself. So.
All right, any other questions from the board?
Go
ahead. Let's go dancing and then we'll go back to Bridget.
Okay, so I appreciate this further discussion about what it's going to be looking like and the point of the exercise of being supportive and being flexible as to how that support is going to occur within the family dynamics that are needed, so that the planning of having a continuation of their learning day is a critical piece. Because part day before was kind of pushed back by parents because it was disruptive to the flow of their day for coming and going, and from a safety perspective, the lowest amount of additional people coming in on a campus that we can provide is going to enhance that level of safety and consistency that we want to achieve as a campus overall. So to the extent that we can scaffold and provide that additional support in place for families that need it, that's that's moving in the right direction. And I appreciate the explanation of the numbers, not in terms of equity, that you're actually looking about what you can, who needs it, and what you can achieve within that desire to maintain similar cohorts that families and students have been providing. That's very helpful. That's very helpful for me.
Bridget, did you have another question?
Yeah, so for the students who are in 7th and 8th grade who may or may not have access to the SLGs. So let's say things turn around and go magnificently with our numbers in our community. And we begin adding on more and more, and surprise, like there is no second wave upon wave or whatever. What are we really saying here, that in all likelihood, the 7th and 8th graders will not be returning to campus this year, unless there's like a miracle with the community spread?
Yeah, I guess I'll take that one. It would be very complicated because of the reasons that we kind of laid out. Like, if we could anticipate that all teachers were able and all families were willing, then that would make it possible. But that's not, I don't think anyone really anticipates that set of circumstances. If we look at the data from the elementary school, families are, the answer to the question about like, are you willing to stay in virtual school for the remainder of the school year? That's just the overwhelming response. So we would anticipate that being similar for middle school. So that's why we want to beef up the supervised learning groups, increase the opportunities for in-person after school supports, which we're calling it, the activities for social emotional benefit and academic. But yeah, that's the clearest I can be. We did have an elementary principal the other day said like, well, things get considerably better by the end of the school year, and this is elementary, right? And by the end of the school year, if there was a teacher who was willing to come on campus and all of her students were willing to come, maybe we could do that. That's possible. And that's similarly possible at middle school. But right now, as we see it right now, I guess the answer is, yeah, we don't really anticipate that because of the complexity of it. And as we're reading the tea leaves, what we see coming down the line.
Okay, I think that's clear. So
Okay.
I think if we can, when we publicize that to people, I think, the explanation, like to capture the video of Mary Beth explaining that chart, I think that was like really very clear. But that is going to be rough for a lot of people to hear, but I think it's important that we communicate that. So, but I think it's a great presentation, and I think it's a great idea. What is for the 7th and 8th grade cohorts that you're talking about expanding on the 21st? That can happen no matter what, right? Because we've already started the cohorts. So if we're still in the purple, I think Ms. Carpi Aguilar talked about transportation. Is there a possibility of, while we're in the shutdown, like the purple phase, not later when things are safer, and so therefore people might not be as freaked out about kids traveling on the bus or being afraid they get hit by a car and there's not being a hospital bed for them? Because would it be possible to look into transportation for the SLGs?
Rob, if you're there, I'll let you take this one. There you are.
I am. Good evening.
Nice background.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. it is something that we have discussed recently, Bridget, and I think what you mentioned about it being available for a moment in time would be the max reality. While our drivers are not, they're standing ready to work and they are transporting students to SLGs that are within our typical service areas, we haven't expanded beyond that. And just to be blunt, my concern would be that, bus drivers have been a position that's been historically challenging to recruit. And once you expand services, it is often challenging to bring the services back to the level that they were prior to expanding them, because it does serve as a benefit. The district established the routes as they are prior to me joining the district in 2013 for various reasons. I'm sure it was part of some numerous budget cuts and reductions in staff that occurred in the 08 and beyond area. I see Nancy shaking her head as she probably remembers that. That's never a popular topic. So that would be my biggest word of caution is really the sustainability of that as we would move forward.
Yeah, I just worry that it's one of those situations where, this is an emergency, and if all other things being equal, parents would make the effort to get their kids to school, and for the full school day. If the reason why we're not doing it is because it's not at their regular bus route, I think, we're school board members, we represent the kids. So I have to ask the question, even though I know that it's money and it's precedent and it's all these other things, but I just wonder if there's a way where we can look at the whole shutdown. I was talking to someone and they said they have a kid who goes to SMS, and the kid walks an hour each way to school because their mom doesn't have access to the car right now and won't let him ride his bike, and walking was the best way, and then he's not making it right now. They're just too freaked out. So I don't know if they would actually get on our bus, but I feel like if that was the barrier of not being on public transit and not being out walking through town for an hour, maybe it's worth looking at. I don't know.
It, like I mentioned, is something that we have discussed, and I believe that conversation will be continuing. And to be frank, it's not at this moment, it's not truly from the financial lens, because we do have drivers that are available. It's just like I was mentioning, once we in the fall, or hopefully in the not too distant future, return to a larger program, it would just be sustaining it beyond then. Really, transportation is one of those kind of tricky departments because it's getting everybody to school at just about the same time across the district. And we operate with like a 3.5 bus program, but or 3.5 driver program. We have 4 drivers on staff. But like I said, we can commit to continuing to discuss that internally. And I totally hear where you're coming from.
And it's it's those schools where they're not the schools that do not have high populations of, of kids who have been traditionally served by those routes. They're just, it's almost like, this can't be like a let them eat cake moment, right? Like this has to, this is almost like the structural, this is the institutional racism, right? Like this is the institutional thing that says, well, we can't make that decision right now because that could set us up for all these other things later. But the kids who are really, really needing it right now are, primarily socioeconomically disadvantaged. And, it's just, I mean, it's all the Latino kids at SMS that are in those groups that are really, you know, Pat Carpio's class that she's talking about, the ELD 1 kids, that, I mean, not all of them, but I mean, a lot of them are. Those are the kids we're trying to move the needle on. And so if the reason why they're in there is because they're not accessing it at home, I mean, if we have the money and we can make a short-term thing, I just don't understand why we wouldn't do it.
So, hey, Jeremy, I would love to add another underline. I don't know if this would go to you. I'm only going to you because you do like survey-y stuff. But I'm wondering, as we are opening up these supervised learning groups in the middle school, and as we are starting this 6th grade, it's two pieces. So one piece would be asking if they would actually use it, right? Because I think there's no reason to go through all this work and logistics to figure it out if there's not people who would use this service. But if there's a way for us to figure out, hey, is there actually a group of these students who would come if they had transportation? Because I would say if we do have a group of these students who that literally is their only reason they can't make it, then I would totally be on board with what Bridget's saying. Like, let's figure out a way, like, I know it's tricky, but let's say, hey, in this emergency, this is not a long-term thing. In this emergency, we have been able to figure out a way to transport these kids temporarily. So I'm putting an underline under Bridget with kind of those.
Yeah, and I think our experience from the supervised learning groups is that we call families one at a time and we invite them. And what we can just do is well, the principals do this already. What's the barrier to your being here, to doing it? And if it turns out it's transportation, depending on where they are in the district, if it means rerouting a bus, we can consider it, but that might mean not picking up someone else too. I mean, it's pretty complex. So we can certainly look at that as one of the factors, because yes, the goal is to get all those numbers of students that you saw in the slides to campus. So we can look at that. Thank you.
So I appreciate the discussion, and we don't understand the full need yet. So doing that deeper inquiry is very important. I would add that bridging on with Rob, that if we start something now, we need to be able to commit to that through summer school, because we're talking about potentially the same population that may not be thriving, and just to be mindful of that expectation of, if it's a barrier for you now, what's going to change if we invite you to summer school. So it's that add-on kind of thing that we need to see whether or not we can really sustain it. It would be, and be open to the fact that our buses are only one way that they could get to school. Maybe it's problem solving in different opportunities and different ways that would be acceptable and safe, because we do that with families who are on IEPs as well. So I don't want to be with a fixed mindset. I want to be open to understanding what the problems are for barriers, and then problem solving about that.
I agree, but I also think that, like, right now, because of the pandemic, like, we are told not to, it's very restrictive about, like, having a bubble. Like, I was the bad guy all holiday break, right? Like, my kid was invited to parties and go play, basketball and go do this and whatever. And I said no the entire time. Finally, he stopped asking me. These families who are trying to get to the social learning groups, some of them would like have a neighbor drive them or whatever. They're not in that right now. So I think that it might even just be while we're on purple and shutdown. I would just like to look at, like, what is bridging that gap, because they were already coming. Some of them were already coming, and now they're stopping to stop, whatever. They're not attending anymore.
Correct. What I'm saying is that we need to understand the need first, and then look at solutions, rather than deciding what the solution is without understanding deeply what the needs are for individual families.
And yes, something very quick that I know I also heard Pat talking about that there is a need in her classroom in particular. So there probably is a need in other classrooms too, with kids that with the now they're having an extra hard time going back to their study groups for one reason or another. Most of them, you know, because the pandemic, because the parent that has a car now is driving farther away and cannot come back, and he needs a car to go and work 1 hour away. Whatever the reason is, they don't have that transportation, so the kids are getting too tired to go. I suppose, for what I'm hearing, that now the bus drivers are working full time as usual. They are already very busy with their. No, they are not.
Yeah, no, that's not what I was thinking.
Oh, okay. So if we are, I don't know, like the part that maybe I don't really know is like we have the buses, we have the staff. Is there a way to during this time before summer school we can help this kid not to lose the year and make it to the end of the year? Is there a way to figure it out with the resources we already have and are paying for?
So as we said, Isabel, what we'll do is we'll call the kids, we'll have the schools call the kids, contact the families, and if there's a barrier to their attending, we'll find out what that barrier is, and then we'll try to address that barrier. And then we'll have to weigh whatever solution we have against the cost, the opportunity cost of that. So that might be rerouting buses, and it might be something else. So, but we're definitely open to that. So I think we have our direction.
Yeah. And I was just to add, just generally, it was kind of one of my questions that I had sent in, and then Nancy kind of said more than just transportation. Mike mentioned it too, but that idea of the students who are needing in-person support the most are often ones who are, the families don't feel comfortable coming in, right? So that idea of anything we can do, right? So I love, right, as we call them, we can't solve all the problems, but as we call them and as we find out the needs, I think it's pretty clear that us as a board, right, is very supportive of these students who need that support. Whatever we can realistically do, let's figure out solutions the best we can. And us as a board will support you, staff. All right, Jeff. Yeah.
I'm not really expecting any answers right now about this, but as we're starting to get a better understanding of how the rest of the school year is going to look, and as we're starting to try to meet the needs of some of the students that are struggling the most. And I think this kind of addresses some of the things that Bridget was forming. And if I'm speaking out of turn, I apologize, Bridget. But, and I'm trying to be very careful how I approach this because I don't want to sound like I'm being alarmist either. But I'd kind of like, for future meetings, I'd kind of like to get a sense on where we are with overall, with general curriculum pacing for our students and how we're doing curriculum wise. I suspect, and this is not just Sunnyvale, I'm suspecting it's profession, we're going to start looking at how we're going to implement more spiral curriculum into the future to kind of recoup some of the missing gaps that we might have had to make, some audibles that we had to make for this year. In particular, I'm most particularly worried about some subjects such as, math, for example. I'm also particularly worried about the kids that are matriculating into high school and how we're going to collaborate with Fremont or Homestead and how that's going to, because I think, maybe as we close this year with what I don't want to focus on what we're not doing, but maybe if we start focusing on the needs that we need to recover and how we're going to communicate that to our partners, how to serve our students going in so they can be entering their 9th grade year successful or feeling at least, supported that they can reach success. I mean, the kids that were reaching out to try to be supervised that have been struggling up to this point. I think this is actually something similar to what we try to do anyway with the targeted kids. I think that calls for those measures even more. because I feel there's going to be more gaps, more needs. And I think, again, I'm not looking for answers tonight. I mean, it's just something I think we can explore going forward. I think this can be done through assessments and some pretty, authentic staff meetings when we collaborate as departments in the middle school department in particular. And I want the teachers to understand that we're not looking for blame. We're just looking for the real issue, and we're looking for how are we going to solve it going forward.
That's great, Jeff. Thank you. I second that. And Bridget thirds it and fourths.
Duly noted.
All right. Thank you. Thank you to team. And I know there's lots of the team who is not here tonight, who's working behind the scenes as well, to put this all together at the ground level and at the district level. So thank you so much for all the work you've done and all that you guys will continue to do. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, we are now on to review and action, item 8A, approval of the 2021-22 and 2022-23 school year calendars. Jeremy.
Yes, board, it is my pleasure to bring to you the 21, 22, 22, 23 calendars. Just as a bit of background, we start off utilizing the Fremont Union High School District calendar as kind of a guide to start, but we do have our parameters such as 187 work days for our teachers, 181 days of instructions for students, 3 staff development days, etc. So the calendars before you are aligned, and again, they don't align exactly. So I'm just trying to draw that. We have our set kind of pattern as well, but we utilize it to line up at least the holidays so that if you have a student in our district and the Fremont Union High School District, that you're inconvenienced as least as possible. So these are our 2 calendars. Features of the 21-22 calendar, please note that there is a 4-day weekend in November because Veterans Day falls on the 11th, which is a Thursday, and all parties involved. And so the process is we put this together, we run it by cabinet, we run it by CSEA, SEA, and our principals instructional leadership team. And so we thought that having a Thursday, a Veterans Day, and then how many people are really going to show up on Friday and the student count. So that's the 21-22 calendar. And then I appreciate the board pointing out there was a typo on the 22-23 calendar. There was a floating note about a non-duty day in March. That was just one of our early concepts. So that has been corrected. And this information will be going out as soon as possible because I know our community is wanting to know next year's calendar. And it is nice to think about the future where we'll be in different times. So I recommend your approval.
Thank you, Jeremy. Public, if there's anybody who wishes to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature now.
Do you need a motion or no?
We'll do that after public comment.
I always forget the order.
Aaliyah, are you seeing any?
I am not.
All right. Now we're ready for a motion.
I move that the board approve the attached calendars for the 2021, 2022, and the 2022, 2023 school years.
I'll second.
All right, board, any discussion on this item? Thank you, Jeremy and team, for your work on getting that put together. I know it takes some time and collaboration. Thank you. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, and with that, the motion passes. We are now on to item 9, the consent agenda items. If there's any public who wishes to speak on any of the consent agenda items, please use the raise hand feature now. Aaliyah, are you seeing any?
I am not.
All right, thank you. Board, is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
That,
All right, who's doing the second, Bridget or Nancy?
me.
All right, we'll go Nancy on that second. All right, board, any comments? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and with that, the motion passes. We are now on to 10, and it's informational agenda. It's just to point out some information included. The first is the DLAC minutes. So that's the District English Language Advisory, the committee, council committee. Minutes from October 7th are attached. And then the Williams Uniform Complaint Settlement Quarterly Report, and there were no complaints, and that is attached as well. And then I just want to, I'll say it again later, but I just want to make mention, next week is just a board training meeting where we will be having Greg come in from DWK to work with us as a reminder from the beginning to share in our stuff from that. And then our next regular meeting, but it's board development, so slightly regular meeting, will be on the 21st. And we're now, so closed session, sorry, gotta scroll back. So if there's any public comments on closed session items, please use the raise hand feature now. Leah, are you seeing any?
None.
Okay, board and Mike, are we good going straight into closed session, or do we need a break? Is everyone good going straight in?
Yeah.
Okay, we are adjourning from open session, and we will go to closed session, and then we will come back to finish up our meeting. For those who are leaving now, thank you for joining our meeting and being a part of our Sunnyvale community.
Buenas noches, gracias.
De nada, un placer como siempre.
Hi, we can hear your echo, Jesus. Okay, so we're done for tonight. We call it a night then. Oh, can you guys hear me? Oh.
Yes,
Okay, good. So we call it a night?
I think so.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Hasta la
Aliyah, thank you
próxima.
so much.
Adiós. Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Goodbye,
everyone.
goodbye.
Have a
Until
good
next time.
night.
Buenas noches. Are we staying in this meeting, or we need to log into? I saw that there was another link. Nancy, you're mute.
There's another link.
There is a different link?
Who sent you earlier.
Okay, yes, I'll look for the link then.
Yeah, double check your email for the closed session.
Yeah, I remember there was a link. Okay.
Did you need us to resend it, Nancy?
Yeah, I
found
it. I can't get into my account. It's like, nah, this is not a happy camper. I don't know what's happening here. Yeah, it doesn't recognize me for SESD, so I don't, and it's same for you as the administrator. So I don't know what's happening. What do you do?
Are you trying to do the website again instead of just your Gmail?
It doesn't let me do my Gmail. Yeah, I was trying to get the Gmail off of the website and that didn't work. Let's try again. Okay. Working on it. Working on it. Got that, but I can't off of my phone.
Hey, Aaliyah, it looks like I can't start my video. You're working.
You know, I was at a CMS class today, and in all the breakout rooms, she said it was like an upgrade, a security feature that Zoom changed over the break. So with the new year, she had to go in and like work on all her settings in all her classes. And I was so impressed with like, she just kept her cool, but it was so unnerving having these teenagers there who like, you know, were saying, can you share your screen? And they're like, no. Like, what? But eventually it all worked out. But she was very patient, and so were they. It's like, but it's all, you know, I don't know. Did you have to reset a bunch of passwords with the new year? No. I got a new phone. My old phone died, so I got a cool phone. But I had to log into everything new again because it was a new device. So yay, but sad. Are we all here? Jeff's here, maybe?
Yep, I'm here. It won't let me do my video for some reason.
Leah's working on it. There was just a setting for all of us.
It's okay.
All right, I am reconvening to open session at 10:42. In closed session, we discussed conference with labor negotiator regarding SEA and CSEA. We also discussed public employee performance evaluation superintendent. No actions were taken. And just a reminder again about our future meetings. Next week is our board training. If you cannot find that email that I think I said has 6 questions, then email Jesus and he can send it to you again. And that meeting is starting at 5:30, so earlier start time. And then our meeting on the 21st will be at 7.
About 90 seconds.
Oh,
great. Thank you.